Picture this: a person walking through life with an air of confidence so strong it borders on arrogance. They're always the center of every conversation, as if the spotlight itself was designed only to shine on them. You see their smile, you hear them boast about their success, their intelligence, and the special charm they believe no one else could ever match. But behind that facade lies nothing but an empty void. A narcissist doesn't really live as their true self. They survive through a false self, a dazzling yet fragile mask, sustained by the attention and emotions of those around them. And here's the irony: the brighter that mask shines, the hollower they are inside. So what can actually break them? It isn't loud insults, it isn't heated arguments, and it's certainly not some dramatic revenge plot. What truly shatters a narcissist from the inside out is something far quieter. It's when you stop feeding them energy, when you refuse to play the role they've scripted for you, when you stop seeing them as the only sun lighting up your world. Imagine it. A great actor steps onto the stage, expecting thunderous applause, but instead, there's nothing. An empty theater. Cold seats. The lights slowly fade. In that moment, the brutal truth hits them. They're not a star anymore. Just an ordinary, lonely person swallowed by the dark. In this video, we're going to uncover 7 moments that cause that glittering mask to crack. Each one will show you that it's not anger, but calmness, not confrontation, but silence, not obsession, but your own life that makes the narcissist crumble within. Remember, the goal is never revenge, because revenge still places them at the center of your universe. The true goal is coming back to yourself. When you stand as an independent individual, when you prove that you existed before them and you'll keep shining long after them, that's when the narcissist faces their deepest fear, the truth that they never really had control over you. So, what can break a narcissist from the inside out? The answer will slowly unfold as we move forward. Now, let's step into the very first chapter. Part 1. When they're no longer the center of the universe. Have you ever noticed that for a narcissist, every conversation, every situation seems to revolve around them, as if they were the sun and everyone else just tiny planets caught in their orbit? They crave your eyes on them, your approval, your reactions, whether positive or negative. For them, attention is oxygen. When you admire them, they inhale pride. When you get angry, they still bask in the thrill of being at the center. When you cry, when you beg, that too becomes the fuel they feast on. Do you see? To them, the worst fate isn't being hated, it's being forgotten. Picture a celebrity stepping onto the stage. They expect thunderous applause, eyes sparkling in adoration, but when the velvet curtain pulls back, all they find is an empty theater. No laughter, no cheers. Just the echo of their own footsteps in the cold silence. That is the true nightmare for a narcissist. When you stop chasing them, stop replying to their messages, stop feeding into the emotional whirlwinds they deliberately stir up, you're pulling the stage curtain down. They realize you no longer see them as the star. And in that instant, fear seeps into their heart. The fascinating thing is, you don't need to scream, you don't need to make bold declarations. All it takes is steady silence. Silence that's strong, like slowly dimming the spotlight. That's when their anxiety begins, then panic, then what psychologists call mortification, the total collapse of the false self. To them, you've always been a mirror. They looked into you to see themselves as central, attractive, untouchable. But when you turn away, that mirror shatters. They no longer have anyone to reflect them back, and in that void, they must face the terrifying truth. Inside, there is nothing but emptiness. You might wonder, can silence really be that powerful? The answer is yes, because narcissists don't fear anger, They don't fear blame. They can twist all of that into more fuel to sustain their illusion. But indifference, being unseen, that is something they cannot endure. Do you remember being a child, desperate for your parents' attention, and instead of scolding or praising, they simply walked away in silence? That aching sting. That's the feeling. And in many ways, narcissists are forever stuck in that childlike state. When you stop looking at them, they feel like an abandoned child in a dark room, unwanted and unseen. That's why, when you no longer treat them as the center, the narcissist begins to crack from within, because the mask only survives as long as the audience stays. Once the audience leaves, the play collapses on its own. And here's the thing. This is only the first piece of the puzzle. If this alone shakes them, what comes next will devastate them even more, because not only does the attention vanish, but the very scripts they forced onto you will begin to unravel. Part 2. When the script they imposed collapses. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist is always trying to define you? They don't truly see who you are. Instead, they construct a rigid image, a role you're supposed to play in their drama. Maybe in their eyes, you're the perfect partner, always obedient, always hopelessly in love with them, or the dutiful child constantly putting your parents first, or the loyal employee always ready to sacrifice everything for the job. On the surface, it sounds like praise, but in reality, it's nothing more than a role written into their distorted script. The problem is, that script has never really reflected you. It's like a clumsy sketch drawn with prejudice and immaturity. A few sloppy lines based on assumptions, then painted over with arrogant certainty. I know exactly who you are. Think back. Hasn't there been a time when they said something about you that made you want to laugh out loud? Something like, I know you love this, but in truth, you never did. Or, you always act this way, when in reality, you absolutely despised it. They speak with complete confidence, as if they understand you better than you understand yourself. Yet, deep down, you know, they don't understand you at all. And here's the crucial point. This is where you hold the power to crack their mask. Because when you act differently, when you refuse to play the role they've written, you force them to confront a terrifying truth. They don't control you the way they thought. Picture this. An arrogant director steps onto the set, script in hand, convinced every actor will obey his every word. But as the cameras roll, the lead actor calmly performs something entirely different. No rehearsed lines, no scripted movements. The crew is stunned. The director is helpless. That is exactly how a narcissist feels when you break their script. And it terrifies them, because in their twisted world, you were never meant to be free. You were just a prop in their performance. But the moment you prove you have your own thoughts, your own actions, and that you refuse to be labeled, the entire false world they've built begins to shake. This is a form of narcissistic mortification, the moment the false self is exposed for its weakness. Because narcissists don't just put a mask on themselves, they put one on you too. And when that mask shatters, they're forced to see the raw truth. You are an independent human being who cannot be controlled. At that moment, you may witness their rage explode. They'll try to drag you back into the old role through blame, attacks, or emotional manipulation. But you must understand, this rage isn't power, it's panic. It's like a director screaming on set, but the louder he yells, the more his helplessness shows. And here's the truth. The moment you walk out of their script, you don't just ruin their play. You ruin their deepest belief that they've always been the one running the stage. And this is only the second layer of their collapse from within. Because once they realize they can't force their script onto you, they begin to face an even greater fear. The fear of being abandoned. Before they can abandon you. Part 3. When you abandon them first. Did you know, for a narcissist, every relationship comes with a pre-written ending, not forever together, not happily ever after, but this: devalue you, then discard you. It's the familiar cycle. At first they lift you to the skies, making you believe you're special, but over time sweet words turn cold, gestures of care turn into contempt, and in the end they throw you away like an old toy. In their world, every relationship is just a setup for that final act. But there is one thing you can do that strikes fear into their core: leave them first. Imagine this: the narcissist has their script all planned out. They'll be the one to leave, while you're left behind, broken, begging, consumed with regret. Yet while they're still busy playing the scene of demeaning you, you quietly walk away. No drama, no declarations, just a calm departure. That moment hits them like a slap across the face. The entire plan collapses. The power they held, the power to decide when the relationship ends, slips from their hands. And for a narcissist, losing control is losing everything. This isn't revenge. Revenge still carries anger, and anger is something they can feed on. What terrifies them is a departure without words, without emotion, a vanishing act that leaves no trace. To them, it's as if you've disappeared from their universe. Picture this: they thought they were the predator, the cat toying with the mouse, but in a blink, the prey is no longer there. No running, no pleading, just a vast emptiness. And in that emptiness, they come face to face with the fear they've been outrunning all along, the fear of being abandoned. The irony is this: they discard you to prove they're strong, but when you leave them first, they're forced to see their own weakness. That's when narcissistic mortification, the collapse of the false self, knocks at the door. And yes, you may see their rage explode. They might do everything to pull you back, lash out, shift blame, fake remorse, or promise to change. But remember, that is not love. It's only panic. The panic of losing the power they thought they owned. In truth, your departure isn't just the end of a relationship. It's a mirror held up to their face. It says clearly, you are not in control. You are just a small chapter in the larger story of my life. And that is the pain they cannot endure. Not the loss of you, but the loss of being the one who decides. Not out of love, but because the role of the one who discards has been ripped away. The moment you leave first, you shatter the rule they've clung to. You turn the entire game they've built into something meaningless. And piece by piece, that's what makes them crack from within. But here's the thing: the collapse doesn't end there, because when you walk away, you take something even more vital, their emotional supply, and once that supply is gone, the glittering mask they wear will begin to crumble. Part 4. When the lies are exposed. Have you noticed how narcissists often talk about themselves as if they were a walking encyclopedia? They present themselves as smarter, more talented, more knowledgeable than anyone else. In every conversation, they somehow manage to position themselves at the center of wisdom and authority. But in reality, that glittering shell is usually built from scattered fragments, exaggerations, half-truths, and sometimes outright fabrications. And the thing they fear most is the moment they're exposed. Imagine this: a magician steps onto the stage, confidently dazzling the crowd with sparkling tricks. The audience gasps in amazement, but then someone stands up, pulls back the curtain, and reveals the clumsy mechanism behind it all. In that moment, the magician doesn't just lose admiration, they lose their dignity. That's exactly what happens when you uncover the lies of a narcissist. Here's the fascinating part: you don't even have to expose them publicly. All you need is to know the truth. Narcissists are acutely sensitive to your gaze, your tone, the silence in the way you listen. If you know their bragging isn't real and you no longer believe it, they will feel it instantly. They see it in your eyes, in the calm indifference you now carry when their achievements fail to impress you. This is when panic starts to rise inside them. Because the false self, the mask that survives only on the blind faith of others, is suddenly threatened. When you know the truth, they no longer control the narrative, and without control over the story, they feel exposed, fragile, and weaker than ever. They may lash out in furious anger. They might attack the source of the truth you've learned, deny it with desperation, or even try to smear you in order to salvage their image. But that rage is not strength. It's nothing more than a flimsy wall hastily thrown up to hide the fear that you've finally seen through them. And this moment is one of the most dangerous cracks in the narcissistic mask, because once the truth begins to surface, the false scaffolding they've built has nothing left to cling to. Eventually, they are forced to face reality. No one believes in the illusion anymore. This triggers narcissistic mortification, an inner collapse. They tremble as they feel their power slip away. They ache as they realize the world no longer buys the story they've spun. And most of all, they are terrified because your eyes no longer shine with admiration. If in the previous part, leaving them shook their control, here, seeing through them is the hammer strike that shatters the false self. Without believers, without admiration, the narcissist is like a magician stranded on a lit stage. Audience gone, spotlight still burning, and no one willing to clap. And from here, the collapse only deepens, because once the lies are revealed, the emotional supply that sustains them begins to dry up, and that's what pulls them into the next spiral of emptiness. Part 5. When you cut off their emotional supply. You might think that what sustains a narcissist is money, power, or appearance, but the truth is much simpler. They live off your emotions. Every time you praise them, it's a dose of medicine for their full self. Every time you get angry, that too is energy they absorb. Even when you cry, when you beg, when you break down in despair, all of it becomes food to feed their illusion of importance. To them, there is no distinction between positive or negative emotions. As long as you react, as long as you keep them at the center, they feel alive. The one thing they cannot endure is indifference. Picture this, a spotlight blazing on one figure. Every clap, every gaze is the current keeping the bulb lit. But then, the audience drifts away, the applause dies down, the switch is flipped. In an instant, the light goes dark, leaving nothing but empty shadow. That's what happens when you cut off their emotional supply. You no longer cry, you no longer beg, you no longer argue, you stop reacting to their provocations, to the mind games they stage. Instead of anger, you respond with calm. Instead of collapse, you meet them with silence. And that silence, to them, echoes louder than 1,000 accusations. Because when you stop feeding them energy, the false self begins to wither. It's like a machine that only runs on batteries. Yet now, the batteries have been pulled out. The shiny metal starts to rust, the engine goes quiet, and the narcissist feels it, deep in their bones. They are fading. Of course, they'll try everything to spark a reaction in you again. They may create drama, spin lies, even invent stories just to provoke you. But if you remain calm, refusing to be pulled into the spiral, they will despair. They will feel as if they are slowly being erased from your life. And for them, that feels worse than death. And here's the truth. This moment is one of the most powerful for you. Not because you've won, but because you've learned how to separate yourself from the toxic emotional cycle. You're no longer being controlled. You hold the switch now. You decide when the light shines and when it turns off for good. For the narcissist, that indifference is a nightmare. It shatters the illusion that they are always important, always special, always the center. And when that truth sinks in, their mask begins to fracture, crack by crack, until nothing is left to hide behind. But you know what? This collapse still isn't the end. Because once you've withdrawn your emotions, the next step is even more powerful. You continue living your life, happy and free, as if they never existed at all. Part 6. When you live your own life without them. Do you remember the image of a sunflower? It always turns toward the sun, following every movement, every ray of light. In a relationship with a narcissist, you may once have been like that flower, every thought, every feeling revolving around them. They made you believe that only with their approval did you have worth. But then, one day, you stop looking up. You choose instead to turn toward the real light, your life, your dreams, the people who truly deserve your love. In that moment, the false universe the narcissist built begins to collapse. For them, the worst thing is not your anger, nor is it your revenge. It's that you no longer need them to live, to feel joy. You wake up early, sip a cup of coffee, take a walk in the sunlight, smile at the small, simple things in life. And all of it happens without them. To the narcissist, that is the greatest insult, because in their world, they are always the center, the sun, the only source of life. When you prove you can live better without them, you're telling them directly, you no longer have meaning in my life. Picture this. A king sits proudly on his throne, convinced the entire kingdom exists only to serve him. But then, the people leave. They build new lives outside the castle gates, and suddenly the throne is nothing more than an empty, dusty chair, forgotten, abandoned. That is exactly how a narcissist feels when you build your own life. They see themselves as irrelevant, and that irrelevance is the fatal wound, because their false self can only survive as long as they're seen as important. The beauty is, you don't have to flaunt your happiness or prove anything. Simply by focusing on your own life, learning, growing, loving yourself, enjoying healthy relationships, your freedom and peace naturally become their nightmare. Because a narcissist doesn't want you to grow, they don't want you to break free, they want you trapped in the emotional spiral, forever looking toward them. But when you escape that cycle, you've cut the invisible cord they used to control you. They may try to return, to reach out, to stir memories, to fake remorse. But if you've truly stepped onto your own path, they will realize their power is gone, and that is the moment when their inner collapse becomes inevitable. Because you haven't just taken away their attention, you haven't just exposed their lies, you haven't just withdrawn their supply, you've proven that you are completely free. You don't need them to be yourself. And for a narcissist, nothing is more devastating than that truth. But there is still a deeper layer, because all of this leads to the final, most powerful moment, when you don't just live your own life, but you become whole, independent, and fully grown. The very thing they can never reach. Part 7. When you become yourself, separate and free. By now you've walked a long journey, you've withdrawn your attention, broken their script, left them first, exposed their lies, cut off their supply, and built your own life. But there is one final step, more powerful than all the rest. It's when you don't just escape them, you fully become yourself. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming a whole individual, no longer dissolved into the expectations of others, no longer trapped behind anyone's mask. You no longer live to please, to prove, or to perform. You live as a mature being who knows who you are, what you want, and what your true values are. For the narcissist, this is the fatal blow, because what they crave most is to turn you into a copy of themselves, a person forever orbiting their false self. They are like the vampires of old tales, biting to turn you into their kind so you too would thirst for blood, living in the same darkness. But when you grow, when you claim your freedom, you say to their face, "I am not your copy. I am an independent human being. I existed before you, and I will continue to exist after you're gone." In that moment, the narcissist feels their deepest collapse, because they haven't just lost control. They haven't just lost supply. They've lost the illusion that they could ever define you. You've proven that they are nothing more than a faded chapter in the book of your life, Nothing more, nothing less. And the beauty is, this victory doesn't require applause. It doesn't need revenge. It happens in silence, in your calm smile, in your peaceful days, reading a book, meeting friends, loving yourself. That quietness is the loudest declaration. You've broken free from the invisible chains. You know, many people ask, how do you get revenge on a narcissist? And the answer always surprises them. Don't seek revenge. Live well. Because when you become the strongest, clearest, and freest version of yourself, that's what wounds them most. Picture this: an actor once believed they were the center of the play, but then you step off the stage, discover the real life outside, and shine in your own way. And they're left with nothing but cold lights, an empty theater, and a show without an audience. This is the true ending of the narcissistic cycle. Not you winning and them losing, but you leaving the game altogether. You are no longer controlled, no longer drained, no longer an actor in their play. You are yourself, independent, free, and untouchable. And that is what breaks the narcissist from the inside out.